Okay, I will admit, that final sequence was absolutely thrilling, but I think we can all also admit that those archers were all freaking useless. Hello everybody, I'm here yet again to talk about the latest episode of HBO Max's The House of the Dragon, this time episode 3. And I don't know the actual title of the episode yet because I literally watched it right when it came out, and I'm literally looking at HBO Max on my computer screen right over here, and it still says the title is episode 3. So I'm assuming that the name of this episode is just a grandiose episode 3. This is very much a reviewer problem. I'm certain many of you don't really care, but it's really weird to me because this happens a lot where like streaming services will put up an episode, and for the first few hours of when it's up, the episode title just isn't there. It's very strange. Anyways, small potatoes aside, this was a very interesting episode of this show, mostly because it was essentially a really transitional episode in many respects. A lot of this episode was kind of setting our characters from where they have been the first few episodes of the show so far, and kind of jumping them to kind of a new perspective, and a new sort of, look at the world going forward into presumably the rest of the season. But that doesn't make it a bad episode by any means. I think there's some really interesting politicking and plays that are going on here during this sort of hunt that we're on with the king celebrating the second name day of his firstborn son, Aegon. And a lot of this politicking was super fascinating, but I think the first thing to talk about is the fact that we jumped forward about 3 years in time here, which kind of makes me sad because the actress who plays Rhaenyra is so freaking good in this show that I'm going to be really sad when she eventually swaps out for the older version of Rhaenyra that we're going to get in a little bit. And I'm sure that actress is also going to be amazing as well, and I'm going to miss a few of the other actresses in this show too, but Rhaenyra specifically will be one I'll be disappointed to lose because she is absolutely fantastic. Anywho, we jump ahead 3 years, and I like that the show just doesn't, state outright what exactly happened during those 3 years. We're sort of left to imply a lot of the feelings that's been going on. And yeah, I don't think we missed anything, that was necessary to see in those 3 years, considering, where everyone's at, that we can all get it from context clues. But again, I just love the writing of the show that it just trusts the viewer to be able to get that. And they have some really wonderful scenes to be able to showcase this. I love when we sort of get this messenger from the stepstones sort of trying to bother Viserys, and Viserys being like, come on, there's more important things going on, just showing how little he cares about what's going on with his brother back at the stepstones dealing with the crab feeder. And it sort of just sets that up as just sort of, it's an everyday kind of occurrence that he's just sort of whatever on this. And he's more concerned with dealing with Rhaenyra, who sort of always seems to be top of mind. And I also really like that Rhaenyra is just off alone, just in underneath the tree, listening to this poor squire guy just playing songs for her. And then we have Alicent Hightower coming in, who we know they were close friends, but now they're sort of estranged. And this sort of power play between the two of them that goes on with the with this poor squire, this bard, I guess I should say, kind of being in the middle of it. And you get to see that sort of power play played out based on who this guy is going to listen to. And you get to see that this is sort of an ongoing dynamic, that this sort of happens a bunch. Again, just lovely sort of writing throughout all this, just sort of showcase how this sort of feeling between all of these characters has become very everyday. And just the time skip just kind of allows that to just exist. But then we go to the this hunt that's supposed to celebrate this name day that we have, his birthday, essentially. And it was really interesting to see this because this whole episode, it made me go back and think of way back in season 1 of Game of Thrones, where we had Robert Baratheon. If y'all remember, he basically dies in that season because of him getting killed by a boar during a hunt like this. Now, obviously, it wouldn't have had the pomp and circumstance of something like this being a big celebration, but it's just sort of funny to see the difference between Game of Thrones early seasons where they didn't even have the money to depict something like this, and it happened off, a big event like that happens off screen, where here we get this big, huge, extravagant thing for the entirety of the episode. And so it just sort of made me think about the disparities in how much budget went into the two shows at their different at these different points in their runs. But also too, the boar, we get a boar attack of Rhaenyra here too, that also sort of represents a very similar thing that happened to Robert Baratheon, and she actually survived. So just an interesting sort of thing there. I love everyone sort of vying to marry Rhaenyra because they don't really take her claim to the throne as really legitimate anymore now that there is a son. And we sort of get like this Lannister guy, very arrogant for a Lannister dude, like coming up and being like, yeah, I'm kind of going to be married to you, and just like, being very forward, and Rhaenyra being very like polite with him in the moment, but being very pissed off about it with her dad, and him sort of saying, look, you don't get to just do whatever you want, and sort of again this estrangement, which causes her to go off into the Godswood. And I really love that Viserys is sort of placing, and they talked about this in this like after show, but Viserys placing all these emotions onto like symbols and wanting some sort of a vision, some sort of message from God to tell him what to do. He's such an indecisive character that he just wants to please everybody, but he honestly can't do that. And so he's just looking for someone else to make the decisions. He's ultimately a weak king because he's someone who just can't be decisive, and he just wants someone else to make those choices for him, which is why he's sort of looking for these signs and portents, like the stag, to sort of give him this idea of a symbol. And what's funny is, in a way, Rhaenyra gets that symbol. She sees the white stag, and in many ways that could have just been the sign that she deserves to be ruler or whatever, if they wanted to take that way. But she doesn't say anything about it, and no one other than Cole, her knight's guard, really ever thinks about that or knows that. And so I think that that's sort of an interesting like thing that the writers sort of put into this. I also really liked Rhaenyra's relationship with Cole. I like that they sort of had this conversation, and he sort of like says like, you have power. You are not just some person doddering around. Yes, you are a woman and not seen as much by the people around you, but you have way more power than most, which I thought was like an interesting point of perspective for her character. But it also places into context the fact that she is a woman, how she's just not seen as valid by anyone around her, just simply by nature of her being a woman. Just again, fascinating sort of like constant awareness of the perspective that these are just high lords playing high lord games, and they have way more power than they should have in these positions. But they are ultimately also just dealing with also the same problems like patriarchy and duty and all these things as well. And that is also symbolized too at the beginning of the episode, where we got the great sequence with the Daemon on Dragonback sort of looking for the crab feeder in this fight, and he lands literally on one of his soldiers crying out for him to save him, which was such a great symbol about how all these people battle for these kings and everything, and they ultimately are just like pawns in a game that can be somewhat discarded. Like, yes, they're the general sentiment of these people will be counted in sort of aggregate, but as individual people, they are nothing compared to in terms of how they're viewed by the people above them. And so it's an interesting. I thought that was a really great symbol, not to mention a really beautiful and thrilling sequence with the dragon back there. And really scary too, and just sort of Daemon's again sort of petulance, being like calling for the crab feed, and the crab feed's like, I'll just go wait in this cave. What are you doing? So all of that worked out really, really well. I'm trying to think if there was anything. The idea of Otto Hightower just constantly playing in the background, playing his own daughter and trying to manipulate her into manipulating the king in the final sequences of the episode. We also have him sort of saying like, well, you could marry your Rhaenyra off to your son in a very Targaryen incestuous way, in order to sort of alleviate all problems. It would just make them king and queen together, and that would just fix all the issues right there. And it was interesting to see Viserys' reaction to that, because he seemed more annoyed at like him having to deal with the politics of it all rather than the incest, because we do know that the Targaryens do have a very incestuous family, and it's not sort of outside the realm of possibility for that to be a thing and people to accept it, it being very in vogue, as they say. And yeah, so it's sort of interesting that like the way they wrote it, Viserys could have been seen to be like kind of laughing at the idea of like, you want me to marry my daughter to my son, which would kind of play to us as the audience as kind of like horrified view of incest. But it also is played in a way that in universe it could also be like, oh, God, do I really have to deal with this politicking of handing off my other son, as opposed to like him being actually upset about the incest. So it was like an interesting needle to thread there with that. Yeah, and so all of this was just sort of interesting to just like look at Viserys's just constant inability to please anybody, and I liked his final scene with Rhaenyra being like, "Look, I don't intend to supplant you." We'll see how long that lasts because again, he's an indecisive dude, so I'm sure that probably won't last till next. Well, probably last as long as next episode. But it's sort of like dealing with his doubt about his daughter and things like that, and him like having conviction, but not really. So all that was great, but then this leads us to the final sequence of the episode, which was honestly excellent, bad archers aside, because we can clearly see that this battle is going well with Corlys Valerian, I believe is how you say his last name, teaming up with Daemon. It was a little bit weird meeting a lot of Corlys's kids in this one scene where they're sort of like planning out the attack. It was like we got introduced to a bunch of them at once, and I couldn't really tell who was who for a hot second there. So it was sort of an interesting way to like introduce us to the rest of his family, because it wasn't really clear who was talking about what and whose perspective was what. But regardless, I don't think that that's really all that important, because what's really important is just sort of Daemon being put in this moment where it's like, well, now I kind of need to prove myself because my brother's going to come and save my butt, and I don't want my brother to do that because it'll make me look weak. So he does this sort of Hail Mary play where he sort of goes in and just like pretends to surrender and then goes in to attack the crab feeder. And again, it was very clear that like he didn't intend to really survive this. Like there was a plan and there was people to come in and be there, but it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna go forward and try to just kill him. And I do really like, again, the archers of it aside, like I was like, can one of them please hit him? And I'm glad they eventually do, but it takes a few volleys. But I'm glad that he didn't like make it all the way to the crab feeder in that run, because if he had made it all the way there and like managed to survive all of that, I would have been like calling bullshit on it. As it stands, it's still pretty stark and surprising that he's able to get as far as he does, in the fact that he's even able to survive it. But it's not so ridiculously outside the realm of believability that I was struck by. Again, I keep having to put the caveat of archers aside. One of them should have hit him. I know it's not easy to be an archer, but dear God, come on. Again, they did. I know they did. I'll leave it alone. It was just one thing that was like, come on. Someone hit him. Jesus. But again, this whole bit was really great. Like, all of it was really pretty thrilling. It was all really good. Not the best battle that I've seen Game of Thrones do, but distinctly impressive. And you could really see that it was just a suicide run, that he surprisingly survives. And kind of killing the crab feeder pretty quickly. I thought he would have lasted a little bit longer, but now he's just sort of dealt with here and kind of off screen in the caves, was kind of surprising. I'm sure some people will be disappointed that we don't get a battle between the crab feeder and Daemon, but I think it honestly, it works as it does quite well. So yeah, I think that's most of my thoughts on this episode. Deeply impressive. I really did enjoy this one, even though I don't know if I love it as much as like the last episode of the episode before it. I think episode 2 is still my favorite so far of the 3 that I've seen, but this was also still a distinctly great episode. I love the politicking. I love the action. They're really building out these characters very well and making us sort of feel complicated feelings about each and every one of them. But in the end of the day, this is a very impressive show. So that's my thoughts on episode 3 of The House of the Dragon. I'd love to hear what all of you think down in the comments below. Also, I'm going to just put this out there. For those of you who made it this far in the video, I'm going to be quite frank. I did my review of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power on, I believe Friday is when I posted that review. And, look, I understand this website, YouTube, its comment sections are always not always great. Though I've been very blessed that most of my comments on videos are generally pretty good. That one got particularly hit with, just nastiness because the annoying culture war nonsense that goes on with a show like that and just the discussions around it honestly frustrate me. There are the people that are like, oh, there's black elves, that doesn't make any sense, Tolkien wouldn't have wanted that. But even beyond that, because it's not, I don't want to just chalk it up to that sort of stuff, but there are people like, this show is stupid, it's not as great as House of the Dragon, or this looks dumb, or like, the fight with Galadriel is too ridiculous, oh my gosh, it doesn't make sense, despite the fact that Legolas did the same thing in the Lord of the Rings movies. And I'm not trying to necessarily make fun of that. I mean, I am to some of it, like the Galadriel battle one was honestly ridiculous, but like, I just am so annoyed that everything has to be culture war nonsense. It always has to be, this thing's better. It always has to be hyperbolic, like, this is the worst show of all time. It's so boring. It sucks. It's the worst thing. How terrible. Why do you have to have an agenda? You're a trans person who likes Lord of the Rings, so you must have some sort of politics about it. You only like this show because the right likes it. I'm sorry I'm getting angry about this, but honestly, it was just kind of a bummer to just see a lot of those comments in that video, because it's like, I just want to talk about a show. I'm here to talk about art. I'm here to talk about like things in a nuanced way. It's why I don't give ratings on TV shows where I say like it's 4 out of 5 stars or whatever. Like, I want to have a discussion about something. I'm not here to like feed, like, I will push back against culture war bullshit. I do it on my own channel, but like, the reason I have this second channel and the reason that I do these reviews is not to feed into some culture war bullshit. I don't need to do this secondary channel. I do the secondary channel because I want to have conversations about these shows and art. I don't do this secondary channel to be able to just like feed culture war bullshit nonsense. This channel isn't what pays my bills. The video essays on my other channel does. I do this for fun. I do this because I want to have conversations. I do this because I want to hear your comments. I want to hear your thoughtful comments and have a, like, honest to God conversation about it. So if you are one of these people, and again, I know most of you are not this, but if you are some of the people that come into my comment section and just constantly like rail about culture war bullshit or have to talk about me being trans in the review, screw you. It truly just does bums me out. It really just bums me out quite a bit. And one last thing that I'm going to say too, like, I am going to talk about LGBTQ and transgender issues on this channel. I am going to, because that's who I am as a reviewer. I'm a trans person. So you don't have to like and I know a lot of you do, and I'm not trying to get angry, but I just need to get this out of my system, and I'll just put it out here. It is okay if you don't want to hear a trans perspective on a piece of art, if you don't want to hear about LGBTQ issues in a piece of art. That's totally fine. You should wish to expose yourself to different viewpoints about art and things like that. You should wish to have a conversation about art and conversation about a piece of art with someone who has a different perspective than you, but you don't have to, and that's totally okay. I'm not here to judge that necessarily on its face, but if you are going to come into a trans person's comment section and start ranting at me about talking about trans or LGBTQ issues, that's on you came to my channel and you're yelling at me, a trans person, for having a trans perspective. My point of view is, my intention with my reviews is not to give you a unbiased point of view. There's no way you can give an unbiased point of view on art, because it's art and it's always going to come from a perspective. But the entire reason I give you my reviews is not to like give an unbiased perspective on art. It's to give you my perspective on art. And you can like it or not, and that's fine. I'm not here to tell you if to like my opinion, but I'm here to tell you what my opinion is. And that's what this is going to be. I know that this is a really offhanded rant. I didn't intend actually to make this rant, but I've just been feeling these past few days, so screw it. I'm going to put it here. I will probably cut this out and put this in at the, in my Lord of the Rings one now too, because I realize it probably needs to go there and not in this review, but screw it. I clearly had thoughts that I just wanted to get out of my head and didn't intend to, but there you go. I will leave it there. Beyond all of that, thank you so much. I am sorry that I had to have that rant. Just was getting in my brain this weekend, and I'm glad I have it out of my head. Honestly, truly, I want your thoughts and conversations about the House of the Dragon. I do this because I want the conversation. I don't do this because it pays my bills. I don't do this because I'm trying to push an agenda. I do this because I want to talk about things that I like. So please, I am very curious what you think. Beyond all of that, I love you all. I hope you're all taking care of yourselves. Thank you for indulging me, and I hope you all live long and prosper.